So let's kick things off with our first keynote. I'm really excited to introduce Matthew. We were chatting last night. I said there's two ways to make money in financial services: risk and rewards. But there couldn't be more complexity to what it means to do risk and what it means to do reward. Matthew's been building in this space since the 90s. He's a serial entrepreneur with several successful exits, and we're just super excited to welcome him on stage in order to share his experience about building reward systems. So if you can help me give Matthew a big round of applause and welcome him up. Matthew, come on up.
All right, good morning. Thank you for being here at 9 a.m. It's hard to get developers anywhere at 9 a.m., so I'm excited to see so many people, and on day one. So I'm here to talk to you about rewards. I'm guessing everyone has a rewards card in their wallet, or probably several, and some of you are building around that, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges of it. Because users want a simple experience, but it's actually very, very hard to build. And I've been involved in many rewards ledgers over time, so hopefully you can learn from some of my mistakes and not make them yourself. This is me. The most important thing is that I have worked at Goldman Sachs, which is a socks brand I run, just so I can say that I work there. So why do we care about rewards in the first place? Why are they part of financial services? When I talk to brands about should they build a co-branded card, credit or debit, a lot of people start with money, but we actually say it's at the bottom of the list. Payments are something we all use every day, right? It's the plumbing of commerce, as we say, and what cards you give people influence how they spend and where they spend. You think about this like if you have a Costco card or a Walmart card, you're more likely to go to one or the other. We get a lot of data off of them. We all love data as developers and builders, right? We're going to learn about what they're buying, where they're buying, what other stores they might be going to. And we get to put the brand into someone's pocket. And yeah, hopefully there's profit, or it doesn't work. Because financial brands are still brands, right? They're not just tools. When we think about Chase, it's a huge brand. This is why there is an Amex Centurion Lounge at the Denver airport. It's probably very busy. All the lounges are, right? But like they all have these lounges. They have all these TV ads. If you watch sports, that's all you ever see. 2 of the top 10 advertisers in the US last year are banks. Capital One, billions and billions of dollars in advertising. Chase, billions and billions of dollars. And they're trying to figure out how to make sure that that next thing that you pull out of your wallet, that next experience you have, is on their card. That's part of why the logos are so enormous on the cards, right? They want you to really remember that that's a Bank of America card. And if you do that, then maybe when you're getting a more lucrative financial tool like a mortgage or a car loan, you're going to go to them first because you're already in that mindset. And this comes from the brand affinity, right? So you want to like your brand and you want to do more with that brand. And that is nice if that brand helped you, go to Hawaii or something, right? Get something really amazing. And that is why credit cards especially have become such a huge factor in American life. They're an easy loan. They're something we're willing to get more frequently than other financial products. You only get a mortgage every 7 to 10 years. You only get a new bank account every 20 to 30. The average American will get a new credit card every 18 to 24 months. I'm not average. These aren't my cards. These are the cards of one of my startups. We took a picture of everyone's cards. We dropped them on a table. Rest in peace, Starwood Preferred Guest Amex. Can we all have a moment to remember that card? It was so great. But I do have 30 credit cards. And yes, my score is okay. And it's because it's a fun game. It's a way to engage with these brands. And a lot of people are doing this. It's become huge over the last few years. Probably a lot of you read sites like The Points Guy, which is owned by a giant conglomerate where I used to work. And when they started that blog in 2010, The Points Guy he was a literal guy. I mean, he still is. His name is Brian. He's very tall. That's his big thing. He was just writing a blog about points, and it used to be really controversial in the points community for people to share all the tips and tricks. They didn't want it to get out. And now it's everywhere. There are millions of people in Reddit credit cards and Reddit churning, And these people are trying to break our systems and find ways through them and understand how the system works and make sure it does everything properly. And that onus comes on us as builders to make sure they have a great experience. So what we're going to talk today is more about rewards, the problems when your ledger doesn't work, and of course, payments is plumbing, and so is a rewards ledger. So starting with some of the things we see, one of the biggest challenges in rewards is merchant data. Probably a lot of you have dealt with merchant data coming off the payment network, and it is trash most of the time. Some of you are probably working on this problem and helping solve it, but how do you give rewards to people if you don't know where they're shopping? There's a lot of algorithm creep. We'll talk about that, and we'll come into some lessons as we go. So let's talk more about merchant data. We all know what a merchant category code is. I hope it's those friendly 4 digits. This taxonomy is very old, it's very simplistic, and it does very weird things. Like all the airlines have their own MCC and major hotel brands, and yet most things are just in miscellaneous stores. It's not very helpful. You want logos, you want that great experience, you want to show people where they shopped and have that Walmart logo, that Target logo. And then you want an ID for that merchant. Maybe you want to give a reward directly to that individual merchant. But it changes over time, or they have multiple, or they can't even spell their name. One of the first card-linked offer programs I worked at was at Green Dot. We did prepaid debit cards, and we worked with Walmart. And we wanted to give people rewards and benefits for shopping at Walmart. And Walmart can't spell Walmart. It was like Walmart without a space, Walmart with a space, Walmart with a hyphen, Walmart with a star between it, like Walmart with a space before the W. No one knew why. So we had to build all these complex database tools to kind of figure out what the heck is a Walmart? And we were partners with them. They don't even know their merchant data. We one time shipped something to a Walgreens store that didn't exist because they gave us that address. It just wasn't there. I mean, if the merchant doesn't know where their stuff is, how are you supposed to know? And so what you're getting are these garbage descriptors, right? Someone is going to what they think is a Shell gas station, and it's listed as L&F Auto, LLC, because that's who really owns it. And it's even worse now, thanks to the ease of setting up merchant accounts. Anyone can go on Square or Stripe and put a typo in. At one of my startups, we used to test everything at the coffee shop across the street. Very delicious coffee. Also, we're in Pasadena, California. Their merchant descriptor said they were in Pasadena, California. So you can think I was just gonna do a regex and look for Pasadena. That's not gonna work. And if that doesn't work and you wanna do something like local rewards, the trash is gonna break you. But my favorite example is Hilton. Sorry to the Sheraton that we're in today. Didn't plan that very well. But Hilton is a hotel chain, and all their hotels say things like, Grand Hilton or, Hilton Homestay or whatever they are. But also there's this place, Hilton Head. So don't search for just Hilton. Or like I have, you may give a lot of rewards to people in South Carolina. And they're just very lucky. And so you end up with this problem of how do you get an exact match when there are no exact matches? So this, I think, is just a little silly example of how you do this search, and you'll end up way over-consuming merchants and classifying them the wrong way. So how do you deal with something like this? What's the lesson, right? You can use a merchant enrichment service. A lot of people are selling that as a product, and I encourage you to connect with those companies because it's a big piece of work. Some people build it themselves. When we were first doing this at my startup Wallaby, we built a bunch of this ourselves. Probably should have turned that into the company, but we weren't that smart at the time. You can go to Google Maps, you can do reverse lookups, you can start to bring these things together and figure out who is this really. And then depend on your users as well. I love letting users tell me when our data is wrong. They're your best QA, right? Give them a little button. Hey, this is wrong. Tell me why. We'll go figure it out. And make sure at that moment that you capture everything in that transaction. We always did this by sending the exact JSON we had sent to the end user, we sent back in the ticket because things change over time. So I also thought that these, once we figured it out, these merchant IDs were just stable. Okay, I finally figured out what this gas station is. But this would never be true because they switch from Square to Toast, or they log in a new way. Or this is another good one, which is they're a cafe or a shop, but they also have a Square to Go mobile, and they also have a website. And so they actually are 3 different merchants from 3 different acquirers with 3 totally different setups, and you're trying to think that they're one. And it's very, very challenging to figure out, how do I give people rewards for this thing that they know is all the same merchant? It's very obvious to an end user that this is Joe's t-shirts. It's very, very non-obvious to the computer. The other thing that goes on is the algorithms start shifting. So what causes you to earn rewards is an interesting question, right? When do you calculate them? Is it on the auth? Most of this is credit cards. It's dual message. So there's that initial swipe or dip or tap or entry. And then later there's a post. Sometimes these don't even look the same. You've probably seen this problem where the merchant auth and the merchant post don't align. You could decide to issue people rewards then so you can catch a problem early. You could decide to issue them only after the transaction settles. You could wait until the statement closes and you can go back and look at a bunch of stuff. And then what are the specific items that you're going to use to trigger them, and how do you build that logic? Do you need people to opt into offers? So if you've seen card-linked offers, like if you use Bank of America or Chase, you've probably seen these, where there's a list of deals. You have to click activate. It's like a digital coupon. So you have to keep track of, did this user activate this offer on this card? Everyone deals with this differently. Like Chase, if you have multiple cards, you can opt into an offer. It works on all your cards. Bank of America, it's on a per-card basis. Amex, which built their own, made it really hard. If you have an authorized user, you and your spouse or whatever might have 2 different card numbers. And the offer only applies to whoever clicked the button. Very harsh. Nobody likes that. There might be time constraints, right? You can only use this offer this week or this month. And you have to differentiate between what are you funding and what is the merchant funding, because the merchant might want to have their own rules. So the reward context gets very, very complex very, very fast. As you talk to the folks, especially merchants who are funding it, they start saying, well, I want this. I only want people who haven't shopped with me in the last 90 days. I only want people who spent at least $500. I want people who spent $500 in a single visit, in multiple visits. And how do you deal with all that? And the problem that happens is we start to drift. So if you think about algorithms, we like to improve them. Everyone likes to make things better over time. But if we don't keep the state, then we can't tell what happened in the past. So this is a great example of a thing that I have been guilty of many, many times. I'm like, we're just going to reward this MCC. It's totally fine. We're never going to change it. And then someone's like, oh, but this website, dealer.com in this case, I don't know if they're real, whatever. I guess they sell cars. Dealer.com, well, for some reason they don't code properly. They don't have this MCC, but we gave this promise to our users, so we're just going to tack it on here. This is a huge mistake. What you have to do is start building individually separate rules. The challenge with that is there's some scalability problems, too many rules, and how do you cache that, and how do you make sure it happens rapidly? Again, an advantage here is you don't have to run rewards algorithms in real time. It's nice to. It's a cool experience to swipe your card and get a push notification, hey, you just earned 10,000 points. But unlike pure payment processing, you don't have only 10 seconds to respond to the network. You could take a day. You could take 3 days. You could take 30. It's all fine, because what people want is the accuracy more than anything else. So it's kind of an interesting case to think about as a developer, where you can have a more expensive algorithm and have something that's slower in a world where we typically want things to be very, very, very fast, because we want to make sure that we don't lose track of what we actually rewarded on. And this a little bit goes into the ledger design as well, where you need to say in the ledger why you did the thing you did, not just that you did that thing, right? Like, what reward rule was activated at this time, so you can go back and reconstruct it. You also have this problem, which is like, let's say we realize this, and we realize that Joe complained to us that dealer.com didn't get bonused. And then we look at our data and we realize, Mary also went to dealer.com the other day. Do we go back and do we fix it? And how do we rerun that? And what are the validity dates of what's going on with that particular reward rule? So some of the things that we think about in the algorithm as well is, how do we prioritize various overlapping rules? You run into this a lot, because a single transaction can be many things at the same time. So let's talk about a standard credit card. You earn 2 points per dollar, and you earn 3 points per dollar at grocery. you earn 4 points per dollar at gas. And also, you earn 10 points per dollar at Shell stations. And 6 points per dollar during the month of June because we just wanted you to use your card more. There's a really great new one. Citi just launched this new credit card. You earn bonus points between 6 p.m. Eastern on Friday nights and 6 a.m. Eastern on Saturday mornings for going to restaurants. Wow. Like, this is the first time I've actually seen a 12-hour reward rule. Who wants to guess it cost Citi like $50 million to build that? I will. But we wouldn't spend that much if it were us, right? But like, I was impressed. Chase used to have a Fridays only rule, first Fridays of the month, they call it. It was also dining. Credit cards love dining because it's the thing you do the most. But like 12 hours, it's kind of crazy. Like, it's a little too much in my case. But how do you manage this? How do you figure out what rewards stack and what don't stack? And how do you properly prioritize in the ranking, giving people the right reward? Because if a reward matches 5 rules, a transaction matches 5 reward rules, and you give people the worst possible option, they're not going to be very happy with you. And again, you need to be able to go back and look at the ledger in the case of a complaint and understand what actually happened here. And because we're all in banking, we know that this is also a compliance issue. Banks will require you to say, hey, I calculated these rewards properly. And I gave all the rewards to the user that I promised them. You can give them extra rewards, that's okay, the bank doesn't care. But you can't give them less. That's a UDAP violation. So this stuff gets very serious, even though it feels like it's not real money. It really is. So we talked about some of these before, but this is my like go-to list of edge cases that really get me. Again, multiple mids per merchant. If you've ever done things in tips or gas stations or shipping, there's all these pre-auths and post-auths. When do you actually count things? Like, if I buy something from a furniture store during the period that my reward rule exists, but it doesn't ship and they don't charge me till later, do I earn those rewards? Amazon doesn't even charge you till they ship. You know, how do you think about this? Does the tip count? What if the restaurant closes the tab late? Because there's the transaction date and there's a settlement date and what matters. This stuff really drives people nuts, especially if you have like a sign-up bonus. These are the, spend $5,000 in 90 days and earn 50,000 points. What if you miss that threshold because a transaction posted late? Whose fault is that? It's the bank's fault or the credit card program's fault because the customer's always right. We run to partial refunds. Refunds are kind of easy. If it was a pure refund, it's like you just reduce things. But if someone only earned 1,000 bonus points because they spent $500 and then they returned $20, do you take the $1,000 back? And if you don't, is that a loophole everyone's going to exploit? And how do you detect that in your ledger? Users, as we all know, can break things that you feel like you've done a great job with. And so it's really important to think through all these different edge cases and build the rule set up front, at least so you have a decision. So my first ledger, when I was but a wee startup founder, I just thought it was a database. Like, what's the difference? It's just a bunch of entries. All the fintech builders here know that's a terrible thing to say. We were interpreting bank data. We were running our own cards. We were reading in bank data off of, not Plaid. This is pre-Plaid, so it was Intuit's connector. And we would get transactions twice. We would try to calculate things. We didn't understand the life cycles. And we just thought every transaction was one thing. But of course, a lot of things are being replayed all the time. You have connection errors. And you have duplicates coming through constantly, especially in bank data. So if you're doing a card-linked offer program and you're not actually controlling the underlying payments data, you have a lot of challenges with data coming in and it being inaccurate. So what we moved to over time is real ledgering, immutability, only appending entries, chaining them back to prior entries, right? So if a reward comes in and we issued 100 points, but then later we realized it should have been 120, we don't erase the 100. We don't replace it with 120. We add 20 to it, and we have a parent transaction ID. So we can always trace all the things that happened. We want to make sure that we understand the difference between that auth and settlement and can recalculate based on them. and keep track of all the reasons that stuff happened, right? What reward rule was triggered? When was it triggered? What values were involved in that decision? So we can go back and figure out what happened and debug the algorithm and also justify our behaviors to the user, to the bank, and ultimately to ourselves. So you might be asking, well, okay, ledgers are ledgers, so what makes them different? Well, ledgers are ledgers, but we think they're different. Yes, they both record transactions. Yes, they should both be auditable. Yes, they should both support idempotency, which I'm just excited I said properly, because that one's always a challenge. Yeah, see, this is the right crowd for that joke. But one is tracking real money, and one is tracking funny money, but it's not. People do care about their rewards, but it's not real dollars, right? And maybe it's the first digital currency we're really dealing with. And we have these other concepts like reward expirations and clawbacks and other changes to the underlying balance. So some rewards programs, you could say the good ones, never expire points, but we all know that's not how it works. If you flew here on United and you don't fly in a few years, your points might expire. So how do you build that into a ledger? What's that expiration date? What if you need to claw something back because you said, hey, you only earn rewards if you did these 5 things, and then again you did a refund, and it takes you out of eligibility. That doesn't happen so much in regular financial transactions, like you spent the money or you didn't spend the money. You know, you transferred the money out or you didn't transfer the money out. And then rewards ledgers also allow this concept of transfers and things, right? So how do you go from a United Airline point to a Marriott point to a, I don't know, like a Buc-ee's gas station point? Everyone's got loyalty points. They're all transferable at this point. And what are those events and what do they look like? Because there's a conversion. And that's what makes it different than a pure financial ledger. Standard money movement, it's like, I gave you $100 left my account. If I give you 1,000 Marriott points, that might have been 2,000 Amex points that created those 1,000 Marriott points. And so it's almost more like an FX transaction, except it's fixed and doesn't float. I think the best way to think about how to view reward calculations is that they're downstream of settlements. So when you try to apply rewards in real time, which is like fun and a cool experience, it's where I find a lot of things go wrong. And you'll see some of the bigger issuers will do this, but they'll say like, assuming your transaction settles, there's some fine print. So this is a pretty standard state diagram of like a transaction, but then we just added like, well, the reward issuance is all the way at the end, right? Wait for that settlement request to come in, and when you're actually settling that transaction, then go ahead and ledger that. I built a credit card, which we'll talk about a couple times, the Grand Reserve World MasterCard, the world's first and only wine rewards card. Don't build that. I don't recommend it. But we wanted to do everything in real time. I got a little too excited about the technology of it all, right? And I was like, this thing's going to be real time. We're going to issue rewards immediately. You're going to be able to use them immediately. As soon as you swipe your card, we're going to tell you what you're earning. This is just like a terrible idea. It was like way too much work, and it didn't do anything for the user to know in advance that they were probably going to earn 5x, because what if when the transaction settled, we didn't give them 5x? We did learn that a good way to find all the wine merchants, which are a challenge I'll come to later, is that we could look at all the transactions before the user saw them, right? We'd get a report every day and be like, what did we misclassify? And so we could adjust things before the user looked. And that's an advantage of moving to settlement-based rewards, right? Is like, we get a string of transactions in, and they're probably not going to settle for at least a day. It gives us an opportunity to fix things before they go wrong. It's like real time is fun. That was cool. We built it on QLDB. Who remembers QLDB? Almost nobody, yeah. Real immutability. It was, cryptographically secured. It was like way too much overhead. So that's also always a lesson in building, right, is keep it simple. When you're starting with rewards, a lot of people start very, very simply, and you just want something that sounds basic. So we're going to talk about this wine challenge, right? So we want to do 5x on vineyards. Well, what is a vineyard? Vineyard is not an MCC, so you can't just put 4 digits in. You have to go through a huge variety of different merchant categories, a huge variety of different merchant names, and figure out, like, does this really qualify, right? The business sense of, hey, I'm rewarding on this. You could do other categories, like you could do, recreation. What's a recreation thing? Like, is it sporting goods stores? Is it municipal parks? Is it movies? Everyone looks at it differently. So like another great example is Citibank used to give you extra points on one card on entertainment. What is entertainment? Well, Citibank had included bookstores and nobody else. And so when we were looking at different rewards algorithms to compare these things, we had to say like, well, the context of what's in your wallet changes the context in which a merchant is actually evaluated. Like if we were comparing two credit cards and you went to a bookstore, if you had a Citibank card, then entertainment meant something. If you didn't, then maybe entertainment meant something different. American Express does this with grocery stores. They call them supermarkets, and so small grocers don't count. I don't know why that matters to them, but it just does. And so if you go to, a King's Supers for you locals here, and you use an Amex, it is rewarded. But if you go to like Joe's Market, it's not rewarded. But if you had a Bank of America card, they're both rewarded. And so this context really matters. And you find that all these thresholds and redemption values and other components get really, really complex really fast when you think you're building a very simple program. So let's talk about the architecture to kind of solve this. Hopefully it looks pretty simple. We try to keep it that way. You're going to bring in both reward transactions and non-card transactions on all of these programs, which is another important factor to consider, right? Do you get points for taking a survey, points for signing up, points for referring a friend? Those all go into the rewards database. It's not just the financial transactions. And once you have those transactions, you have to figure out how to classify them and decide what they really are. So we've taken this merchant database, not only all the merchants out there, but ones that we specifically identified for our program. Again, all the vineyards. You can actually get a list of those because they have to be licensed, so you can go acquire that. But a lot of these other categories, like again, if you wanted to do one for cars or one for golfing or one for entertainment or one for recreation, whatever your client or your company's category is, you're going to have to build that database up over time. Maybe you give extra rewards to your partners and lower rewards to non-partner merchants that are still in your special category. So you have to classify those all together and then keep track of all those individual offers and all their rules. When are they valid? When are they not valid? What is the time at which you're going to calculate it? What is the bonus amount? And then ultimately ledger that in. And then ultimately have a reader for the user to see those rewards and understand them. And take, again, those chained transactions and produce the end result. So we talked about maybe you started with 100 points and you realize you did it wrong and now it's 120. Well, the user doesn't want to see all that mess. They want to see the end result. So we made a checklist of what are some things you should consider when thinking about that initial architecture and algorithm, and what do you want to build? Do you want to do it on auth or on settlement? Are you going to use an external merchant enrichment provider? Or are you going to build that yourself? And are you going to make sure to, as I recommend, to do an append-only ledger and not make any changes? And you have to make sure that you're not having problems with replays. There's a lot of edge cases. I can't give you a list of them. I gave you some, but hopefully you can go through what you think is going to matter for your use case and just go out there and real-world test. Nothing beats swiping cards, getting real transaction data, and seeing what's actually happening. Let's talk about why this matters a little bit more and what happens when this goes wrong. So we're at a Sheraton, so I feel a little bad, but I got some problems with Marriott. I have spent hundreds of nights in Marriott's and earned millions of points, and I watch it like a hawk. And one time, they just lost all 50,000 points, which, as you know, is like a pretty good night at a pretty good hotel. And so I called them, and I was like, where are my points? They're like, what points? I'm like, well, I saw them yesterday. They posted. They were there. And they were like, well, they're not here now. Okay, so I want to be like, obviously the call center doesn't know, but what is the database you people are using? It just get poof, right? They had no record of this whatsoever. It was like a bonus, so they couldn't go back and rebuild it. I couldn't say, well, here's my hotel bill. Can you please look this up? And I'm guessing that many of you in here have had really frustrating experiences with loyalty brands. Stays that don't post, rewards that aren't earned, and there's really no recourse. And the problem with that, if you think all the way back to where we started this presentation, is that the rewards are a big part of the reason why people do this. People often think about rewards, again, as funny money. It's not real dollars. But actually, a lot of people view rewards in an irrationally high-value way. The actual value of a Marriott point or an American Airlines mile might be 1.5 cents or 0.7 cents. And lots of people on the internet will love to argue with you about exactly what those values are, and you can look them up and you can decide. But the reality is the value is the thing that you got out of it, right? You earned all these points and you took your family to Hawaii, or you visited your grandmother, or something else that makes your heartstrings pull, right? So that's the value. That's why people do this. That's why people pay attention to cards. It's not, well, maybe for a few people like me, it's about just collecting points. But for most people, it's about that end result. And the value of taking your family to Hawaii isn't just the pure cash value. It's all the experiences you have around it. And that's what makes you loyal to a brand, and that's what makes you loyal to a card. And so when we think about how do we reduce churn on our product, and how do we increase usage, and how do we help people share our product with friends and become net promoters, it all comes back to what is the value that they are getting out of those rewards. And if you break that promise because your ledger is broken, or you can't calculate points, or you lose things, you've lost them entirely. There's a lot of strong emotions around money, and those get amplified around rewards. I know people who won't get a card from a bank because a dispute went wrong 20 years ago. And this is a multiplication of that because you're building and building and building rewards over time, and you're investing in an ecosystem. And so when you see things like news articles about devaluation or whatever else, this is why people get so angry about it, right? This is why people are so mad about the lines at the lounges. They feel like they paid for this thing, and it's so critical. And for us, as builders of those systems, we're trying to uphold that brand promise. And if we don't uphold that brand promise, then we've lost everything, and our product's not going to succeed. So I don't stay at Marriott as much anymore because this was very annoying. And they made their program too complicated, and they broke a lot of the other rules. I was really a Starwood fan. Again, rest in peace, Starwood Amex. But this is the stuff that matters. It really makes changes in people's decision making, and it's really critical for us when we're figuring out how to build these individual items and make sure we keep track of it, that it actually works properly. Points are value. They are financial transactions, and the ledgers must be trustworthy. And that merchant data, it will really, really get you every time. And so you have to make sure that you take the time to go back to the very beginning and get the right data in. It's a garbage in, garbage out problem, and build a truly reliable algorithm and a truly reliable ledger and monitor the heck out of it. It's actually, I think, much more complex than just moving the money. Because someone's going to tell you the money came in, or someone's going to tell you the money came out. And all you're looking for is that dollar value. But here you're making decisions based on all the data around that transaction. And as Wade mentioned, you can make money in rewards, you make money in risk, and they're both very complicated because you're making decisions around all the extra data. So I'm a little fast, but what are you guys going to do? It's simple for users. You want them to enjoy it, but it's just a terribly brutal back end. And if you don't get it right, you're going to lose them. Thank you.